Hey everyone, today we're using the Nikon D500 and asking, is it still a good camera in 2024? So I made a video a little while ago with the D500 asking if this was still a good camera and still a viable option. That was a couple of years ago now. It's 2024 and I'm doing it again and seeing if it's still a good camera, even though now we've got lots of mirrorless options and some really great cameras to compete with this. So I've come to a charity boat race event today. I'm going to take some shots, see how it does, and I'm going to ask, is it still a good camera in 2024? Okay, so let's have a little overview of the D500. It's got a 20.9 megapixel sensor, which is a little bit less than average these days, but it's still more than enough for what you need, particularly for on-screen purposes. It's going to give you an image size of over 5,000 pixels wide. I forgot the exact dimensions, but I'll put it down here. So that's loads. It's an F-mount system, so I've been using it with the 150 to 600mm Sigma sports lens throughout this video, which is F-mount. And you're going to get access to all of the F-mount lenses from Nikon. There are loads and there's some really good ones. It's got a 153-point phase detection autofocus system. We'll talk more about that later. It's capable of 10 frames per second, which is not as fast as some of the cameras around today, but it's still pretty good, and you're going to get pretty decent shots of birds, wildlife, action, that kind of thing. And it's also built like a tank. It's really is like a professional camera. It is a professional camera, you know, in a DX body. So all round, really good. It still holds its own in 2024 from the overview of the main specs. I'm not going to go through all of the specs of this camera. I've done that before in other videos. There are plenty of other videos out there that do it as well. And I think if you're wanting to find out if this camera is still for you in 2024, you probably already know all the main features anyway. So go back and watch the other video. I'll put a link up top now if you want to know some of the specs in more details. But for now, we're just going to take some more shots with this and have a look at the quality and some of the features that still make this a great camera in 2024. So let's talk a little bit about why this camera is so good for action. And to do that, we need to talk about another camera, which was the Nikon D5. People really love that camera. It was a pro-spec flagship camera which excelled in the autofocus department. It was just built like a tank. It was, like I say, it was a pro-spec camera. And people were crying out for a version of that camera that had all the same features, or at least a lot of them, but in a smaller body with a crop sensor. And that's exactly what Nikon made, the D500. So like I said, it has got that exceptional autofocusing system. At the time that that came out, it really was remarkable, and it can still hold its own today in 2024. It's not going to keep up with some of the more modern mirrorless cameras, especially when using live view, but when you're looking through the viewfinder, it's going to be perfectly acceptable for bird photography, wildlife, motorsports, aeroplanes, that kind of thing. So don't overlook this. even compared to some of the mirrorless alternatives available now. Likewise, the FPS, frames per second, you've got 10 frames per second there, which again, you can get cameras that'll do up to 120 frames per second these days, but 10 frames per second is not to be sniffed at. You can get plenty of shots in a burst with that. And the thing that really makes this good is the buffer. And that's how many shots you can take before the memory gets full and it says I can't take any more. And this will take up to 30 frames, it'll stop at 30 frames when using the SD card, but you've also got an XQD card slot in here, and when you're using an XQD card, that'll go up to 200 frames before it stops. So it's unlikely you're going to need more than 200 in a burst. And the other thing to say is that in 2024, there's been firmware updates to this camera, and you can now use CF Express cards, so they're the newer cards, but physically they're identical to XQD, and the firmware update will let you use those cards in the D500. If you're looking to get the D500 in 2024, it's going to be competing against cameras such as the Canon EOS R7, the Fujifilm X-H2S and the Olympus OM1. And you can't really get this new anymore, so you're looking at second-hand deals. But it's probably generally going to be cheaper than the ones I've just mentioned, certainly the Canon and the Fujifilm, maybe the Olympus. And because people are moving over to mirrorless now, you find really good deals on these and you still get a really good camera for your money. So have a look on eBay and the second-hand market and you might just get a bargain. Here are some reasons you might not want to get the D500 in 2024. So if you want something smaller, like I said, this was released as a mini version of the D5, but compared to a lot of the mirrorless options available now, this is not exactly small, so if you need something a bit smaller, a bit lighter, mirrorless might be the way to go for you. If you like to shoot video, this will shoot up to 4K, 40 frames a second, or 60 frames a second HD, which is not bad, but it won't keep up with a lot of the newer mirrorless cameras. And if you like an electronic viewfinder, obviously this is not going to be the way to go. An electronic viewfinder is good because it will show you the exact exposure of your image when looking through the viewfinder or on the back of the screen, and obviously you don't get that with an optical one. If you want access to arguably better lenses, I can't speak for other camera brands, but I know that the Z-mount lenses for mirrorless On balance, probably better than the F-mount ones. Although having said that, you can get some bargains now with the F-mount lenses, so it swings and roundabouts really, but I would say overall the newer lenses are probably better. If you want to produce large prints, then a crop sensor camera at 20.9 megapixels is probably not for you. There are better options out there with higher megapixel ratings which are going to produce better prints. Or if you don't need to do action, then maybe the D500 is not for you. It does excel at things like birds, wildlife, motorsports. Perhaps if you are just doing landscape or portraits, you can find, say, a full frame option that's a bit cheaper than the D500. I made this video because I think there's still quite a lot of interest in the D500 in 2024. I've got quite a few videos on my channel about the D500. I'll put links below in the description to those videos. And I get lots of comments asking, is this still good in 2024? Is it going to get good results for birds, for wildlife? Is it going to compete with the mirrorless options available now? And I can say that without a doubt, yes, it's still a good camera and it can compete. It's probably the best crop sensor DSLR that Nikon have ever made. Arguably the best crop sensor still, because I don't think there are many good mirrorless crop sensor options from Nikon yet. And yeah, it's not going to quite compete, well, it's not going to compete with the Z8 or Z9. But when you think about how much this camera costs used, you're going to get much more for your money compared to, say, the Z8 or Z9. So go check it out. It will still get you good results in 2024. There are just a few more shots to show you, so I'll put those on screen now. And that's it for another video, so a huge thank you for watching. If you have found this useful or you like the video in any way, please just give me a thumbs up down below. If you're a regular, like I always say, thank you very much for that, I do appreciate it. And if you're new to the channel and you're not yet subscribed and you'd like to do so, you can just click down there on the big red button, or over here on this picture of me. That way you'll stay up to date with everything I'm doing. There's usually a new video every Sunday at 10 AM, but I have missed a few recently, so I'm not going to say every week. But I do try and get one out every Sunday morning at 10 AM UK time. So I hope you'll join me next week for the next one. But until then, thanks a lot everyone, and bye for now.